Thursday, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has stated that relations between Russia and NATO have reached a direct confrontation level as NATO members are holding a two-day meeting in Brussels on how to provide more aid and military support to Ukraine. NATO has been supporting Ukraine in its conflict with Russia by providing advanced weaponry, training and intelligence. Russian President Vladimir Putin had previously warned that the conflict between Russia and NATO would bring the world closer to World War III.
In fact, these relations have now slid to the level of direct confrontation. Indeed, NATO countries and the alliance itself are already involved in the conflict around Ukraine. NATO continues its movement towards our borders, expanding its military infrastructure towards our borders.
So DD India's Dasha Chernyshova is with us to give us more on the story from Moscow. Dasha, as we are hearing Kremlin saying that Russia and NATO are now in direct confrontation, what can we expect now? Are we closer to World War III, as many fear?
Well, certainly Moscow does perceive NATO as an aggressive alliance, and the Kremlin repeatedly confirms this, saying that the alliance is getting closer and closer to the Russian borders. It is enlarging. There have been several waves of the enlargement, and also the military infrastructure of this alliance is getting closer to Russia, forcing Russia to respond. So from the Russian perspective, it is NATO that is posing a threat to Russia. From the perspective of NATO, it is a defensive alliance, that it is Russia that has proven once again that NATO is still relevant by supporting Ukraine at the moment. At the same time, Moscow maintains that NATO's involvement in Ukraine means that the relationship have not only slid to the direct confrontation, they have been deteriorated on purpose. The Deputy Foreign Minister Alexander Grushko early in the day was quoted as saying that Washington and Brussels have done their utmost to make sure that the relations are at the critical zero level. Having said that, we also understand that Moscow is not closing the door to any sort of communication or dialogue with the West or NATO, saying that obviously these negotiations could proceed only when NATO stops its rhetoric and does not perceive Russia as a direct threat. The Russian officials repeatedly point that this is the wording that NATO has in its doctrinal documents. So from the Russian perspective, obviously the relations are very tense, but Moscow is not shutting the door. It has been suggested by the Russian officials even before the conflict in Ukraine started in 2022 that there should be some sort of document signed between NATO and Russia. Moscow was coming up with the security proposals, but Moscow insists that NATO was not willing to discuss that. So at the moment, obviously the relationship is very difficult. The relations are tense, and escalation is something that many analysts are expecting. But keep in mind that there was the conversation between the defense ministers of France and Russia that took place on Wednesday. The sides did talk about the issues of common interest, such as tackling international terrorism. And even though their positions on Ukraine are miles apart, the understanding is that dialogue is something that could resume. But again, the positions are very different and they have to narrow somehow.
Indeed, dialogue is the key here. Thank you very much, Dasha Chernyshova, reporting for us from Moscow.